Mercedes Dutch GP was one of the worst races that the team had to go through, and it all boiled down to bad tactics and poor qualifying from Hamilton. Nonetheless, with Russell not even finishing the race and Alonso back on the podium, the P2 Constructors' Championship fight is more than alive, as the lead has shrunk from 51 to 40 points. Russell and Hamilton are not happy with the current situation at Mercedes, and tensions have been rising as to what's essentially wrong with the Silver Arrows, something that could turn into a much worse thing after Wolff's latest brutal assessment of his own team. Mercedes entered Zandvoort with a lot of expectations, and with how Hamilton finished up the free practice sessions, it was obvious that we would have expected at least one of the Mercedes up front. Russell qualified P3 with bad traffic and questionable strategy calls, making Hamilton miss out on Q3 for the first time in quite a long period. Nonetheless, he made up some positions and finished P6, but that was definitely not what Mercedes had in mind prior to the GP, having one driver finish P6 and the other one retiring the car on the last lap of the race. This time, however, it was not due to the pace of the car, the porpoising, or the unpredictability. It was because Mercedes pulled a Ferrari move on themselves and made some questionable calls that made both Russell and Hamilton angry throughout the race. In order for you to understand that, you need to first comprehend how the race started and why the most genius minds behind the pit walls were the most responsible ones for how their drivers ended where they did. The race started in the most perfect way any F1 fan could have imagined. Rain from the very first lap, and the drivers were all on soft compound tyres. It was obvious that they would have either risked it and stayed out on this tyre, hoping that it was just a light drizzle and it would go away, or changed to intermediate tyres and used the momentum to gain a lot of positions on the track. That's something that Perez did, who got into the lead of the race after being the first driver to pit for the intermediate tyres, and perfectly predicted that it would be much more rain than originally anticipated. Russell and Hamilton, though, had very different strategies compared to the Red Bulls, and even though they needed to take risks in order to try and win a race against the invincible Red Bull, this was definitely one of the worst ones they had to make in quite some time. Both of the drivers stayed out on the soft tyre, with Hamilton pitting first and Russell second, a move that put both of them at the back of the grid. The disappointment was very vivid for Russell, who asked his engineer, "I was poised for a podium, how did this happen?" It's safe to say that there'll be a lot of talk back in Brackley, and it's not often that you hear Wolff label the team a subpar one and the race a total catastrophe. But before we get into that, let's see what Russell had to say about his worst race so far in the season, starting P3, not finishing the race, and further deepening the gap to Hamilton to 59 points. Russell had a very early contact with Norris fighting for position, but that contact itself was not as dangerous as you would have imagined. Yet it was in a crucial period of the race, and the puncture left the Brit in P17 and having to fight his way through the grid. Nonetheless, even before that, he decided to stay on the soft compound tyre for a longer period of time, so it was not something that turned out to be a very good decision for his race. While the drivers are not really able to predict whether the rain will be present or not, the radars are something that the team is mostly navigating themselves with, and this time it's like Mercedes' radar decided to take a week off. The young Brit was not happy with the aftermath of the contact with Russell and how the entire aftermath went down. As he went on to elaborate, "The race was over before it really got started. I think the information we had regarding the weather was totally wrong, so that was a real shame. A podium was missed. As a team, we need to review because we're getting the information coming into us and it was misjudged, the weather. So it's not anything to do with racing or engineering, it was clearly just a weather misinterpretation, and that ruined our afternoon. So we really need to look into what happened, why the others decided to pit, what information they maybe had that we didn't, and make sure we don't make the same mistake again." Quite controversially, Hamilton felt the tactics were on point and they were the ones that actually got him the P6 position after he qualified for P13. It was a bad result for Mercedes, something that made Wolff angry because it's not just the pride of the team that's at stake here, it's millions of dollars if they lose the battle to Aston Martin, who managed to creep up even further and shed another 11 points of the championship lead from the Silver Arrows. With 9 races to go and 40 points up on Aston Martin, a team that has been more or less a one-man show with Alonso stealing the spotlight for himself, Mercedes are in huge trouble. And Wolff, out of all the team principals, knows this the best. When talking about the Zandvoort race and what should be expected in the upcoming races from the Silver Arrows, Wolff didn't mince his words, as the Austrian said, "I think we stayed out catastrophically too long. We got it completely wrong. We will review thoroughly. The situation is never one person or one department. It is the communication between driver, pit wall, strategy, weather, and then all of us taking decisions. That was absolutely subpar from all of us, and that includes me. It's good when it hurts, when it stings, it sticks." What is even more painful for Mercedes is that for the first time this year, it wasn't the car's performance, but the fact that they couldn't get the communication going as they should have. We're used to seeing instances like this with Ferrari, and they managed to pull one yet again in Zandvoort when Leclerc pitted and there wasn't a single tyre ready for him, costing the Monegasque an additional 5 seconds in the pit stop. However, with Mercedes, we were always used to seeing knife-sharp decisions that made the team as famous as they are right now, along with the combination of having one of the most dominant cars in the previous turbo hybrid era. But it seems like the departure of some of the key members of the team, such as James Vowles, the head of Mercedes strategy, as well as Loic Serra, who will leave for Ferrari, has left a huge dent in the team that's not easy to fix. They did bring back James Allison and gave him the old position, but even with the new design of the car and the new philosophy, the team just can't catch a break. The most positive thing they could have extracted from the entire race is that the team, especially Hamilton, believes that they have what it takes to fight with Verstappen if everything goes their way. And when talking about this matter, the 7-time world champion went on to say, "I think we could have been challenging Max Verstappen if I'm really honest, particularly when we got to the dry. Pace-wise, we weren't terribly far off. Not saying we would beat them, but I think we would have been in the fight. It's nice if you think that way." It's not really easy to believe in these words, mostly because if they were at the pace of Verstappen, they would have been breezing past the field like the Dutchman. They were faster than McLaren and were on the level of Ferrari, but Aston Martin was in a league of their own. And when I say Aston Martin, I generally mean Alonso. The situation got only tougher for Mercedes as they don't seem to be making any upgrades soon, unlike Aston Martin, which is bringing a new front wing to Singapore and has said multiple times that the 2023 season is not over for them and they're looking to build a new foundation for the upcoming campaign. But with Mercedes spending the majority of their budget cap on building the newly concepted car, one that has yet to deliver the promised half-a-second performance like McLaren found, it's impossible to see their season being any better than what it is at this point. With millions of dollars at stake and drivers who are not satisfied with what's currently going on with the team's philosophies and strategies, there will be a very interesting fight for P2 in the Constructors' Championship, especially with how Alonso has put a dot on the I with the latest performance in Zandvoort. Do you think Mercedes will bounce back at the Temple of Speed in Monza and show everyone what cloth they're made of?